As of April 4th, open-source trackers and recent reporting have made one thing impossible to ignore. In mid-March, something was moving at speed through the South China Sea. Not a supercarrier, not a destroyer, an amphibious assault ship, USS Tripoli, LHA-7. The very ship so many defense analysts had spent years dismissing as a failed experiment. On her deck, as many as 20 F-35B Lightning II stealth fighters. In her hull and across her ready group, 2,500 Marines, destination Hormuz. And that is exactly what makes this so strange. Because on paper, the United States has already shattered most of Iran's military equation, roughly 90% of it. 60 warships now rest on the bottom of the Gulf. Missile factories that once gave Hormuz its bite are rubble. Drone production lines have fallen silent. 2 carrier strike groups hold the perimeter from opposite directions. Lincoln dominates the Arabian Sea. Ford locks down the Red Sea. A third carrier, Bush, is still crossing the Atlantic, only days away. From the outside, the siege looks complete, but Hormuz is still closed. So let us stop looking at headlines and start looking at numbers, because numbers tell the real story. More than 150 tankers remain anchored outside the Strait, bleeding fuel costs every single day they wait. Brent crude is still holding above $100 a barrel because markets do not price hope. Markets price certainty, and right now certainty does not exist. That remaining 10% of Iran's capability is still enough to deny one of the most important shipping lanes on Earth. Mines laid across the seabed, mobile launchers hidden in mountain tunnels, fast attack craft staged inside coastal coves. That is all it takes to shut down a 6 nautical mile corridor. And here is the brutal arithmetic that keeps every escort commander awake at night. You do not have to sink an entire convoy to close a strait. You only need to sink one tanker, one burning hull in that corridor. And after that, no insurer on Earth wants to write the next policy. That is the real mechanism of closure. The strait does not close by force alone. It closes by fear, and fear only needs one example. That is the paradox at the center of this war. The most powerful navy in human history solved 90% of the problem. But escort operations do not require 90, they require 100. And the distance between 90 and 100 is a supertanker on fire. So why is the Pentagon sending a ship most analysts once dismissed to solve the problem that 2 supercarriers could not? What can 2,500 Marines do that 50,000 sailors cannot? If you are proud of the men and women operating these machines, subscribe to Navy Decoded. We do not sell headlines, we solve equations. And to answer that equation, we need to understand the weapon they are sending. A ship America built, hated, and almost discarded. Because the story of why Tripoli was called a mistake is the exact same story that explains why she may now be the answer. When the Navy designed the Flight Zero America-class assault ships, it made a decision that enraged Congress, Marine generals, and defense analysts all at once. It removed the well deck entirely. That mattered more than most civilians realize. The well deck is the ballast-flooded chamber at the bottom of an amphibious ship. It is how LSAC hovercraft launch. It is how landing craft deploy. For every assault ship since World War II, it has been part of the very identity of the platform. Designing an amphibious warship without a well deck is like designing a cargo truck and forgetting the truck bed. The backlash was immediate and severe. It became so intense that Congress forced the Navy to reverse course. The well deck was restored on the third hull, USS Bougainville, LHA-8. The first 2 ships, USS America and USS Tripoli, were written off as failed experiments. Amphibious ships that had forgotten how to be amphibious. Defense writers repeated the verdict. Mistake, compromise, dead end. But the Navy understood something many of the critics did not. The volume once consumed by the well deck did not disappear. It was repurposed, and that freed up a dramatically larger hangar bay, expanded aviation maintenance spaces, a fully equipped surgical hospital, and jet fuel storage that previous amphibious designs could never sustain. Tripoli did not lose the ability to put Marines ashore. She changed the method, from the sea surface to the air. And in exchange, she gained something no other amphibious ship on Earth can truly match: the ability to operate 20 F-35B Lightning II stealth fighters at the same time. That was proven off the California coast in April 2022, when 16 jets from Marine Aircraft Group 13 and 4 from VMX-1 operated from her deck in one surge evolution, 20 F-35Bs. Nearly half the air wing of a $13 billion supercarrier on a ship that costs around $3.50 billion. The ship they called a mistake turned out to be the most dangerous pocket carrier afloat. And that is exactly why the mistake is perfect for Hormuz. We explained in a previous video why supercarriers refuse to enter the Persian Gulf. That 540 nautical mile bathtub Iran spent 40 years turning into a kill box. 100,000 tons of irreplaceable steel is simply too valuable to risk inside it. Tripoli displaces about 44,000 tons. She is not irreplaceable in the way Ford or Lincoln are. In the Pentagon's risk calculus, losing Tripoli would be painful. Losing a supercarrier would be catastrophic. That difference matters. Tripoli is expendable enough to move closer and powerful enough to change the equation. And she brings something no carrier air wing can produce by itself: Marines. Around 2,500 of them spread across 5 ships. The 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit out of Okinawa, the only continuously forward-deployed MEU on the planet. Just before this, they completed exercise Iron Fist 26 with the Japanese Self-Defense Force, rehearsing island seizure, electronic warfare, and rapid amphibious assault between February 23 and March 9. 2 weeks later, Hormuz called. Escorting Tripoli are the Aegis cruiser USS Robert Smalls, CG-62, the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer USS Rafael Peralta, DDG-115, and 2 San Antonio-class LPDs, USS New Orleans and USS San Diego, carrying Marines and their equipment, and there is a cost to this move. Pulling Tripoli out of Japan strips the Indo-Pacific of its only amphibious rapid reaction force. That is not a casual decision. The Pentagon is pulling assets from one theater to solve a crisis in another, and that tells you exactly how important Hormuz is to Washington right now. The ship they once called a failed experiment is now sprinting through the South China Sea toward the narrowest strait on Earth. And she is carrying something nobody has brought to Hormuz in this form before. Not more missiles. A new dimension. The ground. Iran built beach defenses to stop landing craft from the sea. Tripoli has no landing craft. Her Marines come from the sky. Now nobody outside the command chain knows exactly how CENTCOM intends to use Tripoli. The orders are classified, and any channel pretending otherwise is guessing. But the capabilities are not classified. And once Tripoli arrived, she brought 3 capabilities that did not previously exist at Hormuz in the same way. Each one attacks part of the 10% problem the carriers left behind. Start with the sky. Lincoln and Ford operate in open water outside the Persian Gulf because they are too valuable to risk inside the bathtub. But that creates a tactical penalty. It means there is no persistent air cover directly over the strait. A combat air patrol launched from Lincoln at 500 nautical miles may need over an hour just to reach the shipping lanes. By the time it gets there, its time on station is already being consumed. Fuel becomes the clock, and that means the actual patrol window can shrink to minutes before those aircraft have to turn around and head back. That gap between launch and presence, that empty span in time, is where Iranian drones find tankers. Tripoli changes that with one brutal advantage: geometry. At 44,000 tons and roughly $3.50 billion, she is considered expendable enough to move much closer to Hormuz, and her F-35Bs do not need catapults. They are Estovell aircraft, short takeoff, vertical landing. They launch from an 844-foot deck. Now run the math. An F-35B launching from Lincoln at 500 nautical miles and cruising at roughly 450 knots burns more than an hour getting to the fight and another hour getting back. 2 hours of fuel are spent on transit alone. On a standard load, that can leave roughly 40 minutes of real patrol time over the shipping lanes. Even flying 3 sorties per day per jet, you still get gaps measured in hours. Now run the same equation from Tripoli at 100 nautical miles. 13 minutes out, 13 minutes back. Time on station triples. The gaps between patrol windows collapse from hours into minutes. And those minutes are the difference between an Iranian Mohajer 6 locating a tanker first or an F-35B locating the drone first. Tripoli's passive sensors can detect surveillance drones before those drones relay targeting coordinates back to shore-based launchers. Kill the drone and you break the kill chain. We explained in the previous video how that kill chain works. Tripoli is the tool that severs it at the source. So yes, Tripoli helps solve the sky. But Hormuz is a 3-dimensional problem, and 2 of those dimensions have still belonged to Iran. 3 fortified islands sit directly inside the shipping corridor, and no amount of air patrol can fully neutralize a missile launcher buried inside reinforced concrete. Iran controls Abu Musa, Greater Tum, and Lesser Tum, seized in 1971. Tehran has fortified them with anti-ship missiles, coastal radar, artillery positions, and IRGC garrisons. These are unsinkable aircraft carriers, fixed launch platforms sitting practically on top of the shipping lanes. Even after Epic Fury's air campaign, any surviving capability on those islands threatens every ship trying to transit the corridor. This is exactly the kind of scenario Tripoli was built for. And this is where the missing well deck becomes an advantage, not a handicap. A conventional amphibious ship would need to push landing craft through those same mined waters to reach the islands. Tripoli does not need to do that. Marines can insert by vertical envelopment, using MV-22 Ospreys and CH-53 helicopters, not landing craft. They can fly over minefields instead of sailing through them. They never have to touch the water. Iran spent decades preparing to deny. Strike teams can neutralize missile launchers and radar installations, seize whatever intelligence they can carry, and then pull back to the ship before the local garrison organizes an effective counterattack. No permanent occupation, just one mission: leave behind a position that no longer shoots at tankers. There is precedent for this. Operation Praying Mantis, 1988. Marines from USS Trenton boarded and destroyed Iranian oil platforms in the Gulf in a single day. The 31st MEU trains for exactly this kind of raid. Now the honest caveat: raiding a fortified island is a high-risk mission. The true condition of Iranian defenses on those islands after weeks of airstrikes is still unclear. This is the lowest probability option of the three, but also the highest impact option. And that matters. Because even if a raid never launches, the possibility of a raid forces Iran to garrison those islands. And every IRGC fighter tied down defending an island is one less defending the mainland coast. Raids solve islands. But Hormuz is not just islands. It is also 6 nautical miles of open water no large warship can safely enter. So the question grows larger. How do you control a corridor without putting a ship inside it? That is where we arrive at the concept called Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations, EABO. The core idea behind the Marine Corps Force Design 2030 overhaul, the most radical restructuring of the Marines since World War II, and it has never truly been tested in combat at this scale. Hormuz may become the first. Here is how EABO works. Marines fly ashore to small islands, pieces of coastline, or allied territory in Oman or the UAE. They establish temporary bases, HIMARS launchers, radar arrays, forward arming and refueling points where F-35Bs and Ospreys can land, rearm and relaunch without returning all the way to the ship. And what does that create? A kill zone stretching across the entire width of the Strait. HIMARS firing a TKMS at 162 nautical miles, or PRSM at 270 nautical miles, can engage any fast attack craft, submarine or mine-laying vessel entering the corridor. That is anti-ship firepower from shore. At the same time, Marines can provide direct security for the mine countermeasure ships already operating in the area. Small boats screening against fast boat harassment. F-35Bs overhead forming a protective bubble. Mine clearance still takes time, maybe weeks, but Tripoli changes the sequence. Instead of waiting for mine clearing to finish before escort operations begin, Marines help protect the sweepers while the clearing is still underway. That rewrites the physics of Strait control. You no longer need major warships physically inside the Strait to control the Strait. Marines ashore create a firepower bubble that is cheaper, harder to target, and impossible to sink. And no, the precedent is not entirely theoretical. HIMARS already sank Iranian warships during Epic Fury while firing from Bahrain. The 31st MEU just rehearsed a similar kind of distributed operation during Iron Fist 26. Again, the honest caveat matters. EABO is new. It has never been proven at this scale, under sustained Iranian counterfire. The logistics of keeping those forward bases alive remain unproven. But the physics are already real. HIMARS reached Iranian warships from Bahrain. The doctrine may be new, the weapon is not. Now step back and look at the full picture. 3 separate scenarios. Persistent close-range F-35B coverage. Marine raids on fortified islands. Expeditionary shore bases that turn the Strait into a ground-controlled kill zone. None of those options matters alone. Stack them together, and something new appears. Something Iran has never faced and has no doctrinal answer for. Because this is not about adding more firepower to a problem that firepower already failed to solve. It is about adding a dimension that never existed in this theater until Tripoli sailed. For 40 years, Iran prepared to counter threats from the sea. American warships on the horizon, Tehran mastered that equation. Mines under the waterline, cruise missiles from shore batteries, fast attack craft swarming in shallow water. Every doctrine, every bunker, every fortification was designed to make the Gulf too expensive for ships to enter. Then Epic Fury introduced a second dimension, the sky. Carrier air wings dismantled air defenses, flattened factories, and crippled infrastructure. But aircraft fly sorties. They strike, and then they leave. They return to base. They do not remain on the objective. When Tripoli enters the battle space, a third dimension arrives, the ground. Marines can suddenly appear on islands, coastlines, and allied positions all along the Strait, and Marines stay. That is the one variable Iran never truly built its defenses around. Iran built coastal defenses against ships entering the Strait. mines, shore-based missiles, swarming attack craft. Iran built air defenses against strike aircraft coming from above. Those defenses are now badly degraded. Iran built beach defenses to stop landing craft. Tripoli has no landing craft. Her marines arrive by helicopter and tiltrow. Now imagine the view from Tehran. Defend the islands, and the coastline becomes vulnerable to EABO. Fortify the coastline, and the islands become vulnerable to raids. Disperse across every possible position, and there is not enough combat power left at any one point to stop anything decisive. 3 possible responses, 3 bad answers. That is what makes this so dangerous for Iran. The equation has no correct solution because Iran built a defense system for ships and aircraft, not for marines arriving by air onto positions that were never supposed to be contested in the first place. That variable never existed in Iran's coastal defense model, and it cannot build a credible counter to that variable in a matter of weeks, not with factories shattered and air defenses already degraded. Now be honest about what all of this does not mean. It does not mean Hormuz opens tomorrow. Mine clearance still takes time. Escorts still carry risk. Insurance markets still need proof, not promises. But Tripoli can compress the timeline from months toward weeks. And more importantly, she changes the initiative. Before Tripoli, the coalition was essentially waiting for the equation to solve itself, grinding Iran down through siege and air attack, while oil markets bled by the day. After Tripoli, the equation can be attacked actively from multiple dimensions at once. If this video changed how you think about an amphibious assault ship, subscribe to Navy Decoded. The next equation is already being built. Now let us return to the paradox we started with. The 10% problem the supercarriers could not solve. The carriers solved 90%. That is an extraordinary achievement by any standard in military history. But Hormuz does not grade on a curve. Hormuz runs on absolute certainty. And 90 is not 100. 1 mine, 1 missile, 1 tanker burning in the corridor. That is all it takes to keep insurers frozen and the shipping lanes empty. So the Navy did not try to solve the last 10% by sending more ships into the corridor. It sent a force designed to operate where ships cannot. On islands, on coastlines, in the air above the Strait, at ranges no supercarrier can sustain from standoff distance. The Navy refused to enter Hormuz, so they sent the Marines, not to invade Iran, not to occupy territory, but to close the gap between 90 and 100 by solving the equation from dimensions Iran never defended. Iran spent 40 years solving the Hormuz equation for ships, and to its credit, it solved that equation almost perfectly. Mines, missiles, swarms, mountain tunnels, every defensive layer calibrated against one variable, American steel on the waterline. Iran solved the right equation, but it solved it for the wrong variable. Carriers imposed siege from outside, Marines solved from inside, and the ship they called a mistake turned out to be the answer nobody saw coming.